try to make it quieter.
All right. I think we should be going live now.
Okay.
Yeah, I see live on my screen.
All right, hopefully that's better. I actually replaced the battery as it instructed me to do so, and it continues. Now I want to get wire nippers and get inside the box and find out what makes the beep and just take it out of the circuit.
We are live.
Yes, I know. Okay, so good morning. Today is Monday, May 9th, 2022. It's 9:06 a.m. and this is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And we're looking again at Bill H715, an act relating to the Clean Heat Standard. The governor vetoed the bill last week. And I asked Ms. Chakowski to come into committee and help us look at sort of the legal lay of the land as it relates to 715. Because this all happened over my request came over the weekend, Ms. Chakowski hasn't had time to do a full response to the governor's veto message. But you did write a letter to the administration prior to the veto, and I don't know if drawing on that or even just a cursory read of the veto message, if you have anything you can share with the committee about the governor's message and sort of the, I suppose, because you're our lawyer, I would ask, are there any arguments made in that veto message that strike you as legally sound or persuasive? And I think that's one way, for us to, that's the question we'll be asking ourselves. Should we reconsider anything based on what we will have learned from that veto message? If you're not ready to, respond to that, then we can take it up another time. The House will be going first on this. And so we do have more time, but I wanted to get the ball rolling today, if we could.
Okay, sure. So the veto message is fairly short. I'm not sure if you all have read it, but it really is only 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph, I think a high level statement is that the H715, the costs are and impacts are unknown. So that is one of his first reasons. He cites JFO's fiscal analysis, which does say the costs are unknown. Your committee did spend time looking at this. There are multiple places in the bill where this is referenced. So first, the checkback reports do require detailed analysis by the PUC and modeling on the high, medium, and low price potential impacts on customer fuel rates, both for non-customers, non-participating and participating customers. The technical advisory group is also required to look at potential price impacts on fuels. The equity advisory group is also supposed to look at price impacts after the program has started. There's also, as part of the report back, the PUC is supposed to recommend cost containment strategies, and the legislature is supposed to consider whether or not to put any of them in statute as part of its review process during the next 2 sessions. So I think the bill does acknowledge that at the moment the price impacts are unknown because the policy has not actually been fully generated yet by the PUC. But while they are working, the PUC is supposed to be reporting back to the legislature with the potential price impacts, and the legislature under H715 as passed was supposed to review them and consider whether additional provisions were needed.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any committee comments or questions on that bit about unknown prices and price impacts at this point? All right. And let's keep going in the letter. And by the way, I sent the letter out to everyone on the committee. So if you haven't read it yet, it is in your email inbox.
Excuse me, do you want me to post that letter?
Yes, please. That would be helpful.
Did you send it to me?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you.
So the next paragraph, I think the thesis statement is that there are still too many unknowns in the program and what the clean heat standard is going to look like exactly. And he also mentions that someone described the clean heat standard as a carbon tax on the floor. So, so he's raising the fact that the PUC is given the authority to develop and design the details of the clean heat standard program. So I guess I would just say the bill is 30 pages. There are significant aspects of the program that are not detailed in the bill that the PUC is given the authority to develop. I would like to say that legally, it is not a carbon tax. And
there is no carbon tax, there's no carbon fee, there's no carbon assessment, there is no carbon surcharge. We all agree to that.
okay, I'm glad we all agree, Senator McDonald.
There is no mafia, Joey.
Right.
That's
All
a
right.
quote from a woman in the neighborhood I lived in once.
So he
There has been a doubling in the cost of fossil fuels to the citizenry and to Vermont businesses.
All right. Well,
But
let's,
that's not in the bill either.
yeah. Let's stick to the straight and narrow here so that we don't create more cannon fodder in. So delegation of authority and adequate direction, I guess, is my question about our relationship to the PUC through the bill.
Can you restate that?
Sure. I mean, we see the legislature do a great deal of rulemaking. Sometimes it just says A&R shall write rules to do X. And there's almost literally nothing more than that. That has always struck me as an improper delegation, because we should be providing some guidance, at least the policy bones that underlie whatever rulemaking is going to be, happening. And in this case, we're creating an entire new program. But if it seems to me that not only are we asking them to develop it, we provide, it's not the entire 30 pages, but throughout the 30 pages, there's a great deal of specificity about the nature of the programs to be developed, the factors to be considered, the costs and benefits to be weighed, et cetera. It feels to me like one of the most specified instances of rulemaking I can think of in my, limited time in the legislature, but which is 14 years, not that long, but still, it seems like, so I don't understand the notion that someone might claim we're passing this off and it's really our job to figure this out.
Mr. Chair.
Turn it down.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
We are not creating a program. We have asked the PUC to design a program on our behalf. And my understanding is that 2 years from now, the next legislature will either accept that design, reject that design, or modify that design. But when we the governor's been clear that he doesn't think we ought to delegate the creating of the program or enacting of it without a check back. Is there a check back here that allows the next legislature to create the program that may or may not be designed by the PUC?
Well, sure. I think actually that's the next paragraph in the letter in the governor's veto message is about the check back provision. So from my point of view, we've said enough about our relationship to asking the PUC to come back with a proposal and enough detail in terms of our guidance to them and what we want. So, Ms. Schakowsky, do you want to talk about the governor's final concern? Unless you have anything more to say on the PUC delegation, rulemaking, et cetera.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I don't see a legal issue with the delegation of authority that you've given the PUC. I also don't think the governor does either, because he doesn't actually say that. And I think if there was an argument that could be made about an issue with delegation of authority, that would have been made in this letter, but that isn't what he is saying here. So I don't think he's raising the legal issue of delegation.
Okay. All right, that brings us to paragraph 4, I think.
Right, and so the governor finally states that the checkback provisions in the bill are inadequate and that he would like to see full legislative deliberation and having the PUC come back with the clean heat standard in bill form, not in rule form. So essentially making this bill H715 into a study, having the PUC report back on what the proposed legislation should be. So that's not what the bill does currently, although it's fairly close. You did not direct the PUC to come back with a bill. You directed the PUC to come back with rules that then the full legislature would vote on and be required to pass legislative and a legislative act endorsing. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm not aware, I mean, well, rules have force of law. So you could say it's just a semantic difference that whether they come back with a statute, draft statute, or they come back with a rule. But I'm also not aware of the PUC writing law for the legislature, but perhaps they have over the years and I'm just not thinking of it. Are you aware of instances of that or instances of this scope? You know, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think he's suggesting, although it's not said clearly, this is that H17 would basically be a directive for a study to happen and that the PUC that would then propose legislation. And that is something you do on occasion.
Okay. All right. All right. And for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with the details of the bill, can you remind people of once that why the quote unquote check back, you've already enumerated that we have reports in 23 and 24. We have 2 legislative sessions to review their progress. We have, and then we have the rule itself to review. But can you remind people of why, my interpretation of this as best I know, is a sound legal interpretation, is that there is a full hard stop check back, as in if the legislature takes no action, this rule, regardless of its content, cannot go into force. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, H715 as passed by the legislature required, prevented the PUC from actually filing the rules and preventing the rules from taking effect and being adopted. So they were to draft rules and then present them to the legislature, but they could not actually file them with the Secretary of State or adopt an order.
We don't have to file.
Sorry, couldn't hear that, Senator McDonald.
He was mumbling to himself.
Oh, okay. Well, the governor calls in that paragraph for, the bill, I'll just quote, the bill does not guarantee a full legislative deliberation on the policy plan and fiscal implications prior to implementation. So the governor doesn't define what he means by the phrase full legislative deliberation. But the only means I know of to achieve such an outcome is when we move a bill, and that necessitates the operation of the full legislature. So that means legislative council's involved, JFO is involved, all the committees of jurisdiction. We bring a bill to the floor, there's votes House and Senate, and then it leads to a bill that is presented to the governor. So I don't know how we could have any legislative action that is more deliberative and more full than to actually move a bill. And since the governor doesn't explain what he means by that phrase, it's very hard for me to conceive of there is another definition that we're failing to meet. Okay. That's somewhat editorializing, but it's just trying to be responsive to the claims of the letter.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it seems to me, and I welcome Ms. Tchaikovsky's comment on this. It seems to me that the legislature establishing policy and handing it off to administrators to implement, and the administrators developing rules which are subject to legislative review, is boilerplate. It's what we do all the time. It's how it's done. Is there something, does the governor articulate that there's something different about this? It seems to me he's objecting to our standard way of governing ourselves. And again, I'm not asking Ms. Tchaikovsky a question, just say I would welcome if she wants to comment. If not, I just want to make that comment. It seems to me that the governor is objecting to the way most states, including Vermont, govern themselves. He hasn't really pointed out any significant difference as far as I can see.
Yeah, I think that his concerns have not been expressed citing any legal precedent. There's no legal citation in the veto letter. So I think, just to reiterate, he's concerned about unknown costs, the fact that people don't necessarily understand all the details because the details haven't all been developed yet. So I think that's his two primary concerns, at least. But no, I agree. Yes, delegating rulemaking and policy and development of the details of policy is part of delegation to executive branch agencies. That does happen regularly.
I used to teach this stuff, and I read one of my students reading the governor's veto letter and saying, wait a minute, McCormick told us this is how it's supposed to be. So,
Mr. Chair.
Senator McDonald.
I was remarking to myself that the test of passing this bill seems to be almost like passing a constitutional amendment. 4 years ago, we started working on how to solve this problem. And we came up with a Global Warming Solutions Act. Took 2 years, and now we've had 2 years to how to craft a solution to low middle income and all Vermonters face in using fossil fuels. I was reading in the paper the other day where a fuel delivery person wrote that middle income Vermonters who have no choice but to go cold and hope for spring to come early. That's the fuel dealer saying it. And 4 years ago, we tackled this, and the governor objects to the slow and deliberate decision-making that we put in place. And I have yet to hear any alternative proposal other than no, no, no. Every step has required a 2/3 majority so far to keep moving. We don't have a product yet. What's the administration proposing that we do about Vermonters who turn their thermostats down and have to put on more sweaters? What's the policy that is being substituted for the policy that this committee has put forward, that finance has put forward, that the appropriations committee has put forward? What's the alternative that we're being asked to consider?
As best I know, Senator McDonald, there is no proposal from the administration on this, on the thermal heat sector and meeting our legal requirements under the Global Warming Solutions Act as passed 2 years ago.
Vermonters can't afford to sit around and wait for a solution. They just can't afford to do that. And this is why is the fuel dealers running this discussion?
Yeah, when I reported the bill on the floor, I gave a figure for how much more a 250-gallon tank being filled would cost this winter compared to last. The number was something like $687. And so rounding down, I said, how many fill-ups do you have this winter? Multiply by 600. That's probably about how much more money you've spent this winter over last. And a senator came to me in the cafeteria after that and said, well, I've had 5 fill-ups and that's $3,000. And that's just about how much more expensive this winter has been for me than last. So I think your point's well taken. I think this has happened to, I don't know, 100,000 Vermonters this winter. It's been an expensive winter.
Well, next winter, Mr. Chair, it is likely that we will be discussing food price increases. If Ukraine doesn't plant its usual wheat crop, we're going to be looking at food price increases. And we've been looking at this for 4 years. We have a proposal that has been crafted slowly, is being reviewed at every step. And now where we've arrived is going to be vetoed, and the next legislature is going to have to start from scratch. This doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not affordable for our citizenry for us to dawdle. So.
Right. Okay. Well, I would agree. If I were to put on my another hat, I would say, in reference to the veto letter, this hound doesn't hunt. So with that, if there are any other comments or questions from the committee on 715, we can move on to 518.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
will the Senate be looking to this committee for a recommendation on whether or not to override?
I don't know if we formally take a committee position. I mean, my sense is, well, we have a quorum, so let's poll ourselves here. I won't assume anything. Everyone who's, believe our colleagues want us to continue to move the bill, but does everyone here in this committee believe that an override is merited?
Yes.
So
Mr. Chairman, I almost didn't vote for this bill because I think it is inadequate to the crisis facing us. And I have many constituents that urge that the bill be defeated because it fails to rise to the occasion. To do yet less, I haven't made a formal announcement, but I've let it be known that I do intend to run for another term. And I would be very hard pressed to face my voters, to look them in the eye and explain why we accepted the governor's position. The governor's position basically is denial light. He'll give lip service. He'll say, yes, global warming is a problem, but we don't want to do that to address it. So I would vote to override, and I would, if the committee is asked, I would recommend an override to the Senate.
Okay. I figured I would remind people of our, briefly of our floor report and respond to the governor's veto message, and then we'd be off and running with a vote. I don't know what the formal floor work. I've reached out to leadership about what they would like to do, how they'd like to proceed, et cetera. Floor work. Senator McDonald, I'm not going to assume anything. It sounds to me like you're all for moving ahead with attempting to override. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we would be derelict in our duty if we didn't override.
Just to remind us all, we had a strong vote on this the first time around, 23-7, and I would hope that we would maintain that vote, if not increase that vote. In part, if only because we have a legal obligation to act, and inaction, I think, is close to some sort of dereliction of duty when you're looking at an obligation to act. Especially given that our actions have so many opportunities, 2 full legislative sessions downstream of this moment, in order to observe what's going on and make adjustments. All right, with that, thank you, Ms. Chakowski, and we'll turn to H518, an act relating to municipal energy resilience initiatives. Senator Perchlich approached me on Friday afternoon. I don't know if he's going to be able to join us because he went to a committee of conference. He's hoping to step out of it and come present something. We have a little time, 518.
Let me take care of that for you, Mr. Chairman. Let me produce for you Senator Perchlich.
I am in the room. I don't know where you want me to go.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you there.
He
Oh,
wasn't.
there you are. No wonder I couldn't see you. Perfect spot. Now I can see you easily. So thanks for coming in. So Senator Perchlich, we talked on Friday. You've been at work on an amendment to the bill, and just to remind people who are jumping back in, 518 contemplates sending money out, expanding the State Energy Management Program, SEMP, and expanding it to all municipal entities other than schools. And I think your proposal is to say, well, this is a good program. We know that. How could we involve schools in it as well? So, but I'll stop right there and let you introduce the idea. And Ms. Wasserman's here, so we can look at some language as well.
Yeah, I failed to bring copies with me. I just gave a copy to the Senate's office. And I'm not.
Excuse me, there are copies on my desk of 518 in a folder, I believe.
Of the amendment or of the 518?
So Senator Perchlich, do you want to walk through the concept?
Yeah, as the chair said, the concept was to include schools in the work that we're doing to help Vermonters save money and reduce their uses of fossil fuels for thermal energy in particular. Last year in education, we created a program, the Fast and Act 72, that would fund a renewable heating system program for our schools. A lot of our schools are already heated with renewable energy. We have a lot of wood heated schools. A lot of those were done after the oil embargo in the 70s, and they need repairs. Some schools are looking to switch back to fossil fuels because they're chip heating systems, like the ones that were made by Chip Tech. Chip Tech is now out of business. Was a Vermont company. They're having trouble getting parts, and they're being approached by the fossil fuel industry. So like, this would be really easy if we just switched to propane. These chip systems are complicated, even though they're a local cheap fuel. There's a lot of moving parts compared to like a propane system. So the idea was to help these old renewable heating systems stay as renewable heating systems, make repairs, get upgrades, put in new heating systems. But then the Act 72 passed. The language for the program was in the bill, but appropriations took all the money out. And we included language in there that said, the next fiscal year, the legislature shall find a way to fund this program. I know we can't bind future legislatures, but that was the intent, to show that this is a good program, but we just didn't have the money last year. We have figured out that it is ARPA eligible if you fund it to a high poverty school, which the ARPA guideline high poverty is all the Title I schools, which is the vast majority of them. I think it's like 200 and some of our schools are Title I. So it wouldn't be all schools, but it's a large amount of them that meet the ARPA guidance. The Department of Public Service, with some money that the legislature gave them, is trying to do some of this, but that's $2 million, and the need is greater. So the idea, I thought that the SEMP program could be used for that. BGS said they don't want to deal with schools. So the idea was, instead of forcing schools into the program as designed through BGS and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, just carve out $4 or $5 million, give it to AOE, that they would do a grant solicitation to the schools at a 50% cost share. That we could use that money to help these schools either install renewable heating systems or repair their existing heating systems, renewable or otherwise. So that's the general idea. But I haven't got a chance to talk to anybody on appropriations, and might hold the amendment, but just kind of give that same speech about how if our goal is to save money and reduce fossil fuels, especially in municipalities, the schools are the biggest buildings and the largest users. So I think it's just an oversight to not include school buildings in this effort. And we're putting a lot of money into municipal buildings. So I just hope that we could put some money into the school buildings. So that's the general deal.
Speaking informally outside of committee, so I'm glad that you're here so that the rest of the committee can hear about this concept. And let me check in with Senators McDonald and McCormick. Do you support the notion of including schools in not exactly the SEMP program, but in an analog to it that would be through AOE? And the when I spoke to Senator Perchlich initially, my like my comfort level, it's just mine, nothing in stone, and it's not my money. I had thought $4 million going to schools would be meaningful help. So that was that. So now I want to check in with the committee and see where the committee's at.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator McDonald.
We've been debating the wisdom of continuing to operate the Rygate plant, which makes electricity out of wood chips. And even though that electricity is more expensive than other baseload electricity, and we're debating whether or not to continue operation of that plant on behalf of people that make and harvest wood chips. If we've got schools that are using wood chips for their thermal heat, that are wrestling with decisions on whether to continue to use chips, need upgrades, that's going to be good for that industry and perhaps, seems likely would continue for our local schools to heat them, to be heated at less cost than switching to fossil fuels. There could be a win-win situation here where we can follow and head in that direction.
Sure. Senator Perchlich, you probably know the number. Is it 42 schools, 44 that heat with wood chips, something like that?
Yeah, I was gonna look that up to have the number off my head, but yeah, it's around there. Could be down to 38. There's like Randolph,
Williamstown.
well, they used to have one, they don't use it anymore. Like broke down, they switched to fossil fuel, but it's all there. They're like, it's ready. We have the money to fix it. We could switch back to chips. So yeah, it's around 40 or 38 or something like that.
Okay, right. So compared to Rygate as a facility burning chips to produce electricity, it's a relatively modest, well, I don't know what the percentage is, but it might be a meaningful portion of the wood chip market to keep schools. And I don't presume that that's always what a school will choose. Maybe it would choose to move on to some other renewable form, but I don't know if any other renewable way of generating large volumes of heat in a renewable system other than wood fired.
Mr. Chairman, as is so often the case, I wouldn't be surprised if one or another colleague went through this proposal with a magnifying glass and came up with all sorts of problems in the details. But your question was, how do I feel about the concept?
Yes.
I would say at this point, I like it, and go into it and try to identify whatever problems may be there. But I think as an approach, and in theory, it's a good idea.
Okay. So the gatekeepers on this, I think, decision really, I mean, one, it's important for our committee to support it. And then secondly, but it's because the budget is in the process of being locked down. I think practically speaking, it's going to be up to the budget committee of conference as to whether or not it wants to accommodate a change. We could put the language in when 518 is up for, we have 2 more days. It'll be second reading tomorrow, third reading the next day. Although this time of year, I always want to be ready to move faster in case we're just going to do everything in one day. So with that, then Senator Perchlich, if when you speak to approps about it, then I think you could fairly characterize it as this committee supports your proposal to look into whether or not we can do this.
And my understanding is this, you wouldn't have a third reading on this since it's a further proposal of amendment.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Right. So yeah, if we had more time, it'd be better. So I understand it is very late. There isn't time to look at all the details. That might be, I thought we were going to have the money in the yield bill. That's why I didn't advocate to put it in this bill earlier. But I will. I'll try to talk to appropriations and see, because it is taking money away from the municipal. So it's like the total dollar number is the same, but it would be.
Well, but I also got some good news late Friday, and that was that compared to our budget, which is 26 million, that the House had 10 more.
Right.
So that number is actually going up. So we could still send more to municipalities while sending some to schools. So that was the other thing from my point of view that made it a positive, a more palatable proposal at this time. It wasn't going to be to the loss of the municipalities, because compared to what we were already approving, they were going to see yet more money. And Ms. Wasserman, good morning. Hope your child gets better soon.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to pipe in on that Becky Wasserman Legislative Council, just to confirm that Senator Perchlich's amendment does reflect the amount that was discussed in appropriations on Friday.
Oh, great. Okay.
So it is the full 45 million. And the money would be deducted from that, not from the amount that came out of your committee.
Okay. And then speaking on that same point, so I'd love to, because we're running short of time this morning, to circulate Senator Perchlich's amendment to the committee, so people can read it, and then we can try to, multitask and review it before it would ever come up. The other thing is, though, our own amendment offered by members of this committee that you drafted on behalf of this committee that clarified the language around intent around the use of funds for fossil and non-fossil fuel solutions, designs. At that point, I said, for ease of reading, can you include, more than just the point edit? And so it references the old dollar amount. So I would think we would want to revise that amendment in order to, so we don't on the floor offer an amendment that would end up overriding what we just voted through in the appropriations report. Can you make that dollar amount change so we're back current with that amendment, please?
Sure, and I can send that a copy to you with that change in it.
Okay, and so thank you, Senator Perchlich.
Thank you.
So committee members, I'll circulate it to everyone who signed on as a sponsor. I'm guessing it doesn't change anyone's interest in being a sponsor, but since we're short of time, it's just going to be a correction. 26 million becomes 36 million. I think that's the change. Is that right, Ms. Wasserman?
Yes, so I'd have to change the total number for that section
Sure.
from 35 to 45, and then the 26.6 million would become 36.6 million.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can make those changes to the amendment, that way our amendment will be back current again. All right. Thank you very much for your help. And with that, for the last 10 minutes, we have H175, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system. I asked Mr. O'Grady to draft an amendment, and Mr. O'Grady, if you could share it with the committee, and we'd just like to go through it. It is a brief amendment. I think, and it's designed to address the concern that we heard expressed that the bottle bill could have an unintended adverse impact potentially on the finances of the municipal recycling facilities. So the amendment calls for more explicit examination of that so that as we move forward, again, there's a long-term implementation horizon, 2.5 years, we will have our eyes wide open and be able to examine any impacts and help design and or redesign the program to address those. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. O'Grady to just walk us through it. Thank you.
Good morning, it's Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. There are actually 2 amendments in front of you, one of which is the amendment that Senator Gray just discussed. In 10 VSA 1532, in the requirements for the stewardship plan for beverage container redemption, there is currently a requirement that the plan address impacts to municipal recycling. And as the chair just noted, that there was some questions about that and some requests for clarification. So the existing plan regarding impacts to municipal recycling will be replaced with the subdivision 3 of the amendment. And the plan will propose a protocol for documenting the amount of bottle bill materials that are processed and marketed by materials recovery facilities, and shall propose a compensation formula of glass, plastic, and aluminum covered beverage containers that are made usable as recycled commodities. So basically, there's going to be a compensation formula for those municipal recycling facilities that are engaged in recycling right now. Do you have any questions?
Municipal recycling facilities are anything from a town that operates a transfer station to a large county-wide, like Chittenden County solid waste.
Right, so
Are they all within that umbrella, or is that a subset of that?
it's all in that umbrella because we're documenting the amount of materials that are processed and marketed.
You've answered my, yeah.
So municipalities that don't have a MRF in their own town are sending them to the MRFs anyway. And if they're not, then they're selling them directly.
Yep. Yep.
And then, okay,
So it looks at the big picture, not just a
right.
small part of it that tries to make sense of the overall system.
Yeah.
What is,
Hallelujah.
what is the reason behind pushing the implementation out 8 years?
So what this does in the second instance of amendment, you may recall that underneath the plan, the producer responsibility organization gets to keep 50% of the unclaimed beverage deposits. And they get to keep it for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, all of the unclaimed beverage deposits go back to the state, but you're not putting all of them into the Clean Water Fund anymore. You're putting half into the Clean Water Fund and half into the Waste Management Assistance Fund. And that second instance of amendment, I had to change that date because in the bill, section, I believe it's 5 of the bill, I had that going into effect July of 2025. And it said that 50% of the unclaimed deposit remitted to the state would go into the Clean Water Fund. Well, only 50% is being remitted. Right, because the producer responsibility organization is holding 50%. So 50% of what would have been remitted would have been 25% of the unclaimed deposits.
So this is a head scratcher in my, I look at it as, this is what you have recrafted the language to make it do what we
Right.
reported
What
what we're
you
supposed to
intended
do.
to do.
It's a technical
Right.
correction. It's
It's
not a
it's
change in
really-
policy.
And implementation begins in 2025, not in 2030. This is just when the producer responsibility organization no longer retains 50% of the unclaimed deposits and they start going 50% into Clean Water Fund, 50% into Waste Management Assistance Fund.
This is a technical
It's a technical amendment
Change
to
to
make sure the
do-
effective dates.
to make happen what we reported was
Right,
supposed to happen.
right.
Thank you for catching.
I had that, Dan Dickerson actually caught it.
Well, thank whoever caught it
Right.
deserves our thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grady. So I just want to double back to that question Senator McDonald helpfully asked. When we say material recovery facility, does that include, for instance, Middlebury has a pretty sophisticated transfer station. I don't know if in law we would also call that a materials recovery facility. It's not a quote unquote MRF.
If you want to clarify,
Upstairs.
what?
Does anyone know where Senator Bray is?
He's
Yeah.
home.
Oh,
On the screen.
I got COVID.
hello. Is this a committee meeting?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, you interrupted.
I'll text him.
Well, I can change this so that it's for documenting the amount of valuable materials that are processed and marketed by municipalities, including at materials recovery facilities. And that would clearly include any type of facility.
Okay. If I think to Senator McDonald's point, just so that everyone knows it's comprehensive, not just the MRFs. That way we'll.
And it should probably be solid waste management entities.
Okay, great. So if you could make that change, that would be helpful. Thank you. Anything else on 175? Okay, great. All right, is everyone? So let me ask there's only 3 of us in the committee at the moment. I had it drafted, so my name's on it, but we don't have possession of the bill. So it's an individual senator amendment, but Senators McCormick and McDonald do like to be on the amendment. Not,
Would you please rephrase it?
Do you want to be a sponsor of the?
I wish to sponsor.
Senator McCormick?
Yeah, I'm sort of deferring here. I don't really claim to fully understand this. I'll vote for it, but
All right, no problem. Mr. O'Grady, if you can put Senator McDonald on, that'd be great. If anyone else in the committee tells me they want to be on, I'll get back to you ASAP. I just never want to leave. I never want anyone who left off an amendment that they would like to be on, just by virtue of the fact that we had a draft quickly. Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Grady.
So I will send it to you. You're gonna have to send it to the Senate Secretary.
Okay, I'll do that. Yep, will do. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you.